"Let me build you a house," a rancher promised. The Apache neighbor woman said, "Then let me build our home." The sun was beginning to dip behind the hills, casting an orange glow across the vast land that stretched out before him. Tom Carter stood at the edge of his ranch, looking over the fields he had worked for years. The air was crisp, the scent of fresh earth carried by the evening breeze. His cattle roamed in the distance, grazing peacefully under the fading light. For Tom, this land had always been everything: his life, his work, and his pride. He was a rancher by nature, hard-working and determined, with calloused hands that had known nothing but labor since he was a boy. Every fence post he set, every cattle gate he fixed, was a reminder of the sweat and effort he had put into making this ranch what it was. But as he stood there, something felt different. The land felt empty. His eyes wandered across the horizon, and his gaze fell on the small cabin just beyond his own property line, the cabin of his neighbor, Sierra Redfeather. She lived there, just across the stretch of land, in a modest home made of wood and stone. Sierra had always been a mystery to him. She was different from everyone he had known, not just in the way she lived, but in the way she carried herself. There was something about her presence, something that made her stand apart. She was Apache, born and raised on this land, and her connection to it was deep, almost spiritual. He had seen her a few times over the years, but their conversations were always brief, exchanges of pleasantries at best. Tom was a man of few words, and Sierra, though kind, always seemed a bit distant, reserved in her own quiet way. But today, as he stood there, his thoughts drifted to her. He didn't know why, but he felt the urge to go over and talk to her. Maybe it was the emptiness he felt, or maybe it was something else. There had been a stir of something in his chest every time he saw her, but he had always brushed it aside, telling himself it was just the loneliness of living so far out here. That evening, as the sky turned darker and the first stars began to appear, Tom made his way across the fields toward Sierra's cabin. He didn't know what he would say, but something in him told him that now was the time. As he approached, he saw her sitting by the fire outside her home. She was wrapped in a shawl, her long black hair falling over her shoulders as she stared into the flames. Her face was calm, serene, as if she was lost in thought. She didn't notice him approach until he was only a few steps away. "Evening, Sierra," Tom called out, his voice breaking the silence of the night. She looked up, her dark eyes meeting his, a small smile playing on her lips. "Good evening, Tom," she replied. Her voice was soft, but there was a strength to it, a quiet confidence that he admired. She gestured to the ground beside her. "Won't you join me?" Tom hesitated for only a moment before nodding. He sat down across from her, the fire between them crackling with warmth. The flames danced, casting shadows on their faces as they both stared into the fire for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Tom didn't know why, but he felt nervous. This was unlike him. He was never one to sit around and talk about feelings, especially with someone he didn't know well. But today, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had to be said. "You know, I've been thinking," Tom began, his voice low. "I've been working this ranch for a long time now, and well," he cleared his throat, feeling awkward. "I don't know, maybe it's just the way the land looks tonight, but I've been feeling like there's something missing, something more I could be doing." Sierra raised an eyebrow, her expression unreadable. "More?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Tom scratched the back of his neck, not used to opening up like this. "I've got everything here, cattle, land, a good home, but I don't know. It feels like it's just me, and I've been doing it all alone for too long." He paused, looking out at the horizon, his gaze distant. "Maybe I could do something for someone else for a change." Sierra watched him, her eyes softening as she took in his words. There was something in his tone, a hint of longing that she hadn't noticed before. She understood. She understood more than he might know. "I've noticed the same," she said quietly. "This land, it has a way of pulling you in. But it also leaves you with a lot of space, a lot of quiet. Sometimes too much quiet. Tom nodded, his eyes meeting hers again. That's it. I've worked hard to build this place and it's been a good life, but I can't help but feel like, well, like there's more I could give. More I could offer. There was a moment of silence between them, the sound of the fire crackling filling the space. Then, with a quiet sigh, Tom spoke again. I've been thinking about you, Sierra, he said, the words coming out before he had time to think. And I want to help. I want to do something for you. Sierra looked at him, the warmth of the fire reflecting in her eyes. She didn't speak at first, just regarded him with a calm, thoughtful expression. Tom's heart beat a little faster, unsure of what he had just said. He was used to speaking in practical terms, but this felt different. Finally, Sierra spoke. What do you mean, Tom? Tom cleared his throat again, his nerves growing. I've got plenty of land here, plenty of resources, and I've been thinking that I could build you a house. A place where you can be safe, a place where you can live without worrying about anything. His voice softened, his words feeling more sincere with each passing moment. I want to help you, Sierra. I know you've got your own life here, but I could offer something. Maybe it's just a house, but it's something. Sierra blinked, her face unreadable for a moment. Then slowly she shook her head, a small, almost amused smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Let me build our home, Tom, she said, her voice steady but with a quiet strength beneath it. If you want to offer something, let me build it. Let me build a home, not just a house, but a place where we both can stand together. Not one built from your resources alone, but one that speaks to both our spirits. Tom was taken aback by her words. He had thought she would appreciate the gesture, maybe even feel grateful. But instead she had turned his offer around, made it into something more, a challenge, a question. And though it startled him, it also stirred something deep within him. I don't understand, Tom said, his voice rough. You want to build it yourself? Sierra nodded, her gaze unwavering. Yes. If I'm to have a place here, it will not be just for me. It will be for both of us, for our spirits to come together. I cannot accept your offer as it is. If you want to give me something, Tom, give me a chance to build it with you. Let me put my hands into this work just as you have put yours into your ranch. Let us build it together. Tom didn't know how to respond. Her words were not what he had expected, but something in them made sense. It wasn't just about building a house. It was about building something real, something lasting. And somehow he knew she was right. A house built with only one spirit in mind would never truly feel like home. All right, Tom said, his voice quieter now. We'll build it together. We'll make it ours. The words hung in the air between them, a new understanding forming. Sierra smiled, a gentle but knowing smile. And with that, they both sat back, watching the flames flicker, the promise of a new beginning burning quietly in the distance. The days that followed were filled with purpose. Tom couldn't remember the last time he had felt so eager about a project. Usually, his days were spent tending to his cattle, repairing fences, or ensuring his ranch ran smoothly. But now he found himself looking forward to every moment spent with Sierra. There was something about her, her strength, her quiet wisdom, that made him feel like he was finally doing something that mattered. Sierra, too, seemed to approach the task with a new energy. Every time they met, her eyes sparkled with ideas, and her hands moved with the precision and skill of someone who had spent their entire life learning the land. She didn't just look at the earth as a place to live. To Sierra, it was sacred, and her understanding of it ran deep. As they sat together on the grass one evening, discussing the plans for the house, Tom couldn't help but admire how easily Sierra slipped into the role of leader. She spoke with confidence, explaining how they would choose the right materials, how to honor the natural world around them while constructing their home. Tom had always been used to making decisions on his own, but now he found himself listening carefully, trusting her judgment. We'll need stones from the river, Sierra explained, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt as she spoke. The river has the strongest stones. They've been shaped by water and time. The walls of the house will hold firm like the land that has stood for centuries. We'll also need wood from the oak trees. Oak represents strength and endurance. Tom nodded, absorbing every word. He had never really paid attention to the significance of the materials he used, but now it felt like each piece of wood, each stone, carried its own meaning. He admired how Sierra saw the world, not just as something to be used, but as something to be respected and understood. "All right, I'll start gathering what we need," Tom said, already thinking about the work ahead. His mind was racing with thoughts of where to find the best materials, how to transport them back to the land. But as he turned to leave, Sierra stopped him. "There's more," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We must also consider the placement of the house, the direction it faces. The house must align with the winds, the sun, and the stars. This land has been here long before us, and it will remain long after we're gone. We have to make sure our home is built in harmony with it." Tom felt a slight shiver run down his spine. He had always thought about building houses in a practical sense, where the land was flat, where the foundation could be set easily. But this was different. Sierra was talking about something much more profound, something he had never considered. "How do we know where to build it?" Tom asked, his curiosity piqued. Sierra stood up, walking to the edge of the field. She turned to face the distant mountains, her eyes narrowing as if she was seeing something beyond the horizon. "The land speaks," she said softly. "It will tell you where the house should be." Tom watched her, trying to understand. He had always respected the land, but he had never thought of it as something that could guide him. Sierra, however, seemed to have a connection with the earth that was beyond words. It was a quiet connection, but it was powerful. Over the next few days, they worked together, gathering materials and clearing the land. Tom found himself following Sierra's lead, letting her guide the process. The work was hard, but it felt right. They spent hours carrying stones from the river and cutting timber from the oak trees. As they worked, they spoke little, letting the rhythm of their labor fill the spaces between them. Every now and then, Sierra would stop to listen, her ear tuned to something Tom couldn't hear. "What are you listening for?" Tom asked one afternoon, wiping the sweat from his brow. Sierra didn't answer immediately. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, her face serene. "I'm listening to the wind," she said at last. "It tells me if we are on the right path." Tom nodded, though he didn't fully understand. But somehow it didn't matter. He trusted her, and he trusted the process they were going through together. The days passed quickly, each one marked by the steady progress they made. The foundation for the house was taking shape, and slowly the dream of a home was becoming a reality. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sierra stood still for a moment, her hands on her hips as she surveyed the work they had done. The stone walls were starting to rise, and the frame for the roof was beginning to take shape. Tom joined her, standing beside her as they both took in the view. "It's coming together," Sierra said quietly, her voice filled with satisfaction. Tom looked at the work they had done, and for the first time in a long while he felt proud. He had built many things in his life, barns, fences, pens, but this was different. This wasn't just a structure made of wood and stone. This was something that had meaning, something that represented the blending of two lives, two worlds. "You were right," Tom said, his voice soft. "This isn't just about building a house. It's about building something that lasts, something that matters." Sierra smiled, a small but knowing smile. "Yes," she said simply, "it's about respect, respect for the land, for the spirits of our ancestors, and for each other." Tom stood there for a long while, his thoughts turning inward. He had always seen the world in terms of what he could build, what he could achieve with his own two hands. But now, with Sierra by his side, he was beginning to understand that building something meaningful wasn't just about hard work. It was about building it together. That night, as they sat by the fire, the quiet of the land around them seemed to hold a sense of peace. The stars were bright above them, and the wind whispered through the trees. Sierra looked up at the sky, her eyes soft with contemplation. "I think we're almost there," she said, her voice gentle. "The house will soon be ready." Tom nodded, feeling a sense of contentment wash over him. It had been a long time since he had felt this at peace, this sure of something. The work had been hard, but it had also been fulfilling. They had created something together, and it felt like the start of something new. "I think we are," Tom said, his voice steady. "I'm glad we're doing this, Sierra." Sierra looked at him then, her eyes filled with an unspoken understanding. "So am I," and with that, they sat in silence, watching the fire burn low, the quiet of the night wrapping around them like a blanket. They had come a long way from where they started, and though there was still much work to be done, Tom knew that whatever happened next, they had already built something that would last, not just in the walls of the house, but in the trust and connection that had grown between them. The work continued, day after day, and with each passing hour, the house they were building seemed to take on a life of its own. Tom and Sierra spent their mornings gathering more materials, and their afternoons laboring under the hot sun, their hands covered in dirt and sweat. The work was tiring, but it was satisfying in a way that Tom had never experienced before. Every time they added a stone or nailed a beam into place, it felt like they were creating something important, something that would stand the test of time. Tom had always worked alone. His ranch had been his world, and he had never thought much about what it would be like to share his life with someone. But as he worked side by side with Sierra, something inside him began to shift. There was a rhythm to their work, an unspoken understanding between them that made the days feel easier, even when the tasks ahead were difficult. Sierra was a natural leader. She moved with a quiet confidence, her hands sure as she measured the timber or guided Tom in the placement of each stone. There were moments when Tom would question her methods, when the way she did things seemed so different from how he had always worked, but each time he found himself amazed by her knowledge. Sierra didn't just build with her hands. She built with her heart and soul, and it showed in the way the house was coming together. One afternoon, as they stood on the edge of the foundation, looking out over the land, Sierra turned to Tom with a thoughtful expression. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice soft, almost as if she were speaking to herself. Tom looked around, unsure of what she meant. "Feel what?" "The land," she said, her gaze sweeping over the open field. "It's alive. Every part of it, from the river to the trees to the mountains, it's all connected. The house we're building, it's part of it, and it's part of us now." Tom paused, taking in her words. He had never thought of the land that way. To him, the earth had always been something to work with, something to shape. But to Sierra, the land was something more. It was a living, breathing entity, a partner in their work. "I think I understand," Tom said slowly, his voice quiet. "It's like we're not just building a house, we're becoming part of the land itself." Sierra smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling with a quiet joy. "Exactly." They spent the rest of the afternoon placing the beams for the roof, a task that required both precision and strength. As the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the land, Tom stepped back to admire the work they had done. The house was starting to look like more than just a collection of materials. It was beginning to look like a home. The frame was solid, the walls were rising, and the roof was starting to take shape. But as Tom looked at it, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The house, beautiful as it was, wasn't finished yet. There was still so much to do, and every day brought new challenges. The weather had been unpredictable, with rainstorms coming and going, and there were still pieces of the project that felt uncertain. But the unease he felt wasn't just about the work, it was something deeper. Something inside him had changed, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. Sierra seemed to notice the shift in him. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the flickering light casting shadows on their faces, she turned to him with a question. "You're quiet tonight," she said, her voice gentle. "Is something on your mind?" Tom didn't know how to explain it. He had never been good at talking about his feelings, especially when they seemed so complicated. He had spent most of his life alone, working in silence, and now, with Sierra, everything felt different. There was a part of him that wanted to keep his distance to protect the space he had always known, but another part of him, a part he didn't fully understand, wanted to draw closer to her. "I'm just thinking," he said, his voice low, "about everything, this house, this land." "Us?" Sierra looked at him, her dark eyes steady. "Us?" Tom hesitated. He wasn't sure how to put into words what he was feeling, but as he sat there, staring into the fire, the words seemed to come of their own accord. "I've always done things on my own, Sierra," he said. "Built everything myself, but now, I don't know, I feel like I'm part of something bigger, like this house, this land, and you are all becoming a part of me." Sierra was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the flames. Then slowly she spoke. "Sometimes we're afraid to let other people in," she said softly. "We're afraid of what it might mean, afraid of what we might lose. But sometimes letting someone in is the only way to build something real, something that lasts." Tom felt her words sink into him, like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples across the surface of his thoughts. He didn't know if he was ready to let someone in, but he knew that with Sierra, he didn't have to be afraid of it. Whatever they were building together, this house, this life, it felt real. It felt like it mattered. The next day, as they continued their work, Tom found himself paying closer attention to Sierra's every move. He watched as she carefully aligned the roof beams, her face focused and determined. Her hands moved with such grace, it almost seemed like she was dancing with the wood and stone. He admired her ability to work with such calm, her quiet strength evident in everything she did. And as the roof began to take shape, he realized something important. He was no longer just building a house. He was building a future. As the final beam was placed and the roof was complete, Sierra stood back and surveyed their work. The house was no longer just a structure. It was a testament to everything they had accomplished together. It was a symbol of trust, of hard work, and of the bond they had formed over the past few weeks. "We've done it," Sierra said, her voice filled with quiet pride. Tom nodded, his chest full of pride as well. But he also felt something else, something deeper. He had come to see this house not just as a physical structure, but as something that held meaning. It was a home, built not just with wood and stone, but with love, respect, and a shared vision. That night, as they sat by the fire once again, the stars shining brightly overhead, Tom turned to Sierra with a question. "Sierra," he said, his voice low but steady. "What happens next?" Sierra smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the fire. "We live," she said simply. "We live here, together." Tom felt his heart swell at her words. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid of it. Whatever came next, they had built something that was worth fighting for. They had built something that would stand the test of time. And as the fire crackled between them, Tom knew that this was only the beginning. The days had become longer as the work on the house neared its final stages. The frame was complete, the roof was set, and the walls were strong, holding the weight of their combined efforts. Tom and Sierra worked tirelessly, shaping the final details of their home, but there was an air of tension in the days that followed. It wasn't the work that was wearing them down, it was something deeper. The world around them seemed to shift, as though the winds had changed, and with it, their sense of certainty. As they stood outside one evening looking at the half-built home, the sky began to darken. Clouds gathered in the distance and the wind picked up, rustling through the trees. Sierra looked at Tom with a steady gaze, her eyes narrowed as she felt the shift in the air. "It's going to rain," she said, her voice calm but firm. "A big storm." Tom, who had grown used to the unpredictable nature of the land, frowned. "We've been through storms before," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "It won't be a problem." Sierra didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, her gaze locked on the horizon, as if she were waiting for something. Tom knew she was in tune with the land in a way he couldn't fully understand. She had always listened to the earth, to the wind, to the sky, and somehow she knew when something was coming. "We need to prepare," Sierra said at last. "The storm will test us. It will test everything we've built." Tom didn't argue. Instead, he nodded. They had already put so much effort into this house. It wasn't just wood and stone. It was more than that. It was a piece of their shared history, something they had created together. And if the storm came, they had to make sure it wouldn't destroy all they had worked for. The wind began to howl louder, and soon enough, the first drops of rain fell. The storm hit with a sudden force, stronger than anything Tom had experienced in a long time. The rain came down in sheets, drenching the land in an instant, while the wind whipped through the trees, bending them low. The sound of the storm was deafening, like a chorus of nature's fury, but it wasn't just the physical power of the storm that unsettled Tom. It was the way Sierra reacted to it. She seemed completely at ease, even as the storm grew fiercer, as if she had known it would come all along. "We have to secure the house," she said, her voice cutting through the roar of the wind. "Make sure everything is locked down tight." Together they worked quickly, reinforcing the structure of the house, making sure there were no weak spots in the walls or roof. The storm raged for hours, but no matter how fierce it got, Sierra remained calm, her focus unwavering. Tom, too, found himself working with a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. It was as if the storm had awakened something in both of them, a sense of urgency, of needing to protect what they had built. By the time the storm passed, the world around them was unrecognizable. The ground was soaked, the trees bent and broken, and the air was thick with the smell of wet earth. The sky had cleared, but the damage left in the storm's wake was undeniable. Tom and Sierra stood together in the aftermath, both exhausted, their clothes soaked through but still standing strong. "We did it," Tom said, his voice hoarse from the wind. He looked at the house, relieved to see that it had withstood the storm. The roof was intact, the walls still standing. It wasn't just the house that had survived, it was their bond, their shared effort. Sierra smiled, though it wasn't a smile of triumph. It was more of a quiet acknowledgement, as if the storm had proven something to her. "We were ready," she said simply. Tom looked at her, admiration in his eyes. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" Sierra nodded, her gaze still on the horizon. "I could feel it. The land speaks to me. I listen." Tom was silent for a long moment, thinking about her words. The land spoke to her. He didn't fully understand it, but he had seen it in action. There was something about Sierra's connection to the earth, something that went beyond logic or reason. She had an intuitive understanding of the world around her, and it was that understanding that had helped them weather the storm. As they surveyed the damage in the aftermath, they found that the storm had done more than just test their home. It had tested their resolve, their patience, and their trust in each other. They had worked together as partners to secure the house, and in doing so, they had built something more than just a shelter. They had built a foundation of trust and respect that would carry them through whatever came next. In the days that followed, they repaired what had been broken by the storm. It was hard work, but it felt different now. The house was more than just a physical structure. It was a symbol of everything they had been through together. Every time they fixed a beam or replaced a broken tile, it felt like they were reinforcing not just the house, but their commitment to each other. One afternoon, as they worked on the roof, Sierra turned to Tom with a question. "Do you ever wonder why we've been brought together?" she asked, her voice soft but searching. Tom paused, the weight of her question sinking in. He had wondered the same thing. There was a reason they had met, a reason their paths had crossed on this land, but he hadn't fully understood it until now. "I don't know," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But I do know that I wouldn't be here, building this house, if it wasn't for you. You've taught me so much about what it means to build something real, not just with my hands but with my heart." Sierra smiled, her eyes bright with understanding. "And you've taught me that I don't have to do everything alone, that sometimes it's okay to let someone else in." Tom reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his hand lingering for a moment longer than necessary. "You've made me realize that too," he said softly. "Maybe I've spent too much of my life thinking I had to do it all by myself, but with you, I don't feel alone." Sierra didn't answer right away. Instead, she simply nodded, her gaze meeting his with a quiet understanding. They didn't need words to express the bond that had formed between them. It was there, in the way they moved together, in the way they built not just the house, but a life together. As the final touches were put on the house, Tom and Sierra took a step back, surveying their work. The house was finished. It stood tall and strong, a testament to their hard work, their patience, and their trust in each other. But more than that, it was a symbol of something deeper, something that could never be shaken, no matter how fierce the storms that came their way. Tom turned to Sierra, his heart full of emotion. "We did it," he said, his voice thick with pride. "We built this together." Sierra looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yes," she said, "together." And for the first time in a long while, Tom felt like he had found something worth fighting for, something that would last, no matter what storms the future might bring. The days after the storm were quiet, but there was a new sense of peace in the air. The house stood strong, its walls solid, its roof secure. Tom and Sierra had worked together to repair the damage, and as they looked around at the land that surrounded them, they felt a sense of accomplishment that was deeper than anything either of them had known before. This house wasn't just a shelter. It was a symbol of everything they had built together, a bond that had been tested and strengthened, and a future that had started to take shape. It was late afternoon when Tom stood outside, his gaze fixed on the house. The setting sun bathed everything in a golden light, making the house seem like a living thing. It was strong, grounded, and ready to weather whatever came its way. He could see himself living here in this house, not just for a few years, but for the rest of his life. And he could see Sierra beside him, sharing this life, this home. Sierra walked up behind him, her footsteps light against the grass. She had a smile on her face, one that seemed to radiate warmth, and as she stood next to him, she followed his gaze. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Tom nodded, his chest swelling with pride. "It is. We built it together." The words felt right. Every stone, every beam, every nail had been placed with care, with purpose, and every part of it had been a reflection of their journey. The house wasn't just a structure. It was a record of the trust they had built, the strength they had shown, and the love that had blossomed between them. But there was more to it than that. As Tom stood there looking at the house, he realized something important. It wasn't just the house that had changed him. It was Sierra. She had opened his eyes to a new way of seeing the world. She had shown him the power of listening, to the land, to each other, to the quiet moments that spoke louder than words. Sierra had taught him that building something real wasn't just about hard work. It was about heart and connection, and sharing the load with someone who understood you. As he turned to her, Tom felt a rush of gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've made me see things in a way I never could have before." Sierra's smile deepened, her eyes soft. "And you've shown me that I don't have to carry everything alone. That we can build something, not just with our hands, but with our hearts." The connection between them was undeniable now. It had been built slowly, piece by piece, just like the house. And now, standing together in front of their creation, they both knew that they had something that would endure, something that was more than just the physical structure of the house. It was a foundation, not just of stone and wood, but of trust, respect, and love. They spent the next few weeks settling into the house, putting the final touches on their home. The work didn't stop, it never did. But now it felt different. Every task, no matter how small, felt like part of the life they were building together. Tom worked alongside Sierra as they planted a small garden near the house, and Sierra showed him how to care for the plants, teaching him about the different herbs and flowers that grew in the area. Tom learned to appreciate the quiet, peaceful moments when they simply sat together, listening to the wind or watching the sun set over the land. As the days passed, they became more comfortable in their new life. The house felt like home, not because it was finished, but because of the way it had been built, with care, with patience, and with the understanding that they were creating something that would last, something that was worth fighting for. One evening, after they had finished dinner and were sitting on the porch, the air warm and still, Sierra turned to Tom with a question. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds for us?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with curiosity. Tom thought for a moment. The future had always seemed uncertain to him, a place full of unknowns and challenges. But now, standing here with Sierra, he didn't feel afraid. He felt like they had everything they needed. Together, they could face whatever came their way. "I used to wonder," he said slowly. "But now I'm not so sure. With you, I feel like I've found the one thing I've been searching for, a place where I belong and someone to share it with." Sierra's eyes softened, and for a moment they just sat there, side by side, in comfortable silence. The stars were beginning to appear in the sky above, each one a tiny light in the vastness of the night, and Tom found himself thinking about everything that had brought him to this moment. The hard work, the storm, the quiet moments shared with Sierra. All of it had led him to this point, to a place where he felt at peace, where he knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together. "I never thought I would feel this way," Sierra said, her voice low. "I've always been independent, always felt like I had to carry everything on my own. But with you, Tom, I feel like I can breathe, like I'm not alone anymore." Tom reached out and took her hand, his heart swelling with emotion. "You're not alone, Sierra, not anymore." They sat there for a long time, watching the stars and listening to the sounds of the night. Everything felt right, everything felt at peace. And as the night deepened, they both knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. There would be challenges ahead, of course. Life was never without its struggles, but now they had each other. They had a home, a place where they could build their future together. As they stood up and made their way into the house, Tom looked around at the space they had created. It wasn't just a house, it was a home. And it was theirs. They had built it together from the ground up, with their hands, their hearts, and their shared vision. And no matter what the future held, Tom knew that they would continue to build. Not just with wood and stone, but with everything they had learned along the way: trust, love, and the understanding that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. Sierra turned to him, her smile soft but full of promise. "We've built something lasting, haven't we?" she said. Tom nodded, his chest full of pride and love. "Yes, we have." And with that, they stepped inside their home, ready to face whatever came next together.